Hello, back again. Well, I'm moving on from my youth videos from Throg's Neck, although I still have another one or two to make. I want to talk a bit about Uncle Howard's garden and also about summer vacations. As when I was a kid, every summer I either went, well, I both went to visit my grandparents in South Plainfield, New Jersey, the Spisos, my mother's family, and we went for a week or two to a place, a hotel. Oh, well, I'll tell you more about it. Pretty simple, nice place in I'm sorry, in Beach Lake, Pennsylvania. hmm but that's for another day. Today, I'd like to start about my first career. I'm going to be talking about three careers that I've had in my life, and most people nowadays are having more than one career. Um, Totally different careers, actually, but some linkage, but totally different careers. Mine started out as in the army, and I was in the army for about 10 years. Um, Many different assignments, very interesting, very rewarding, and very difficult um, in the Vietnam time. Um, But to start, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I went into the army, how I went in, why I went in. I'm not sure why I went in, but how I went in. What I did a little bit before that, which led to going in the army. Um, Interesting background, I think. I should have the background music playing to Puff the Magic Dragon, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. Uh, at any rate, I graduated. We moved from our house, our bungalow in Throg's Neck, in 1958 because the bridge was just about finished, the Throgs Neck Bridge, and they took over our property, which was going to be part of the entranceway to the bridge. So my old house lives somewhere under the pay turnstiles or whatever they're called nowadays, but under the entrance to the bridge. Um, so we had to move, and I hated it because I loved my bungalow and I loved Throg's Neck, but we had no choice. So we bought a house um, in the Morris Park Avenue of the Bronx, also still. It was not far from Westchester Square. I could walk to Westchester Square. Um, we were directly across the street from railroad tracks, which we thought might bother us, but they never did. You got used to it very quickly. It was on Sackett Avenue in the Bronx, and it was actually a pretty nice place for 4 years. I didn't like the house. My mother loved it because we had lived in this little bungalow for a long time up until then. And here she had a house with a beautiful front porch, glassed in, screened in both, and a nice living room and a dining room, which we didn't have before, and the kitchen that was pretty good, and then a small downstairs. What do you call half a bath, which also served as a pantry area. And there was an entrance there that went down to the basement. We had a basement there, which of course we didn't have in Throg's Neck, and it was a pretty big cellar. And one room initially was set up for Uncle Jim's photography, but he couldn't get down there to do that, so that didn't work. And then I had my railroads, my Lionel Railroad set down there, set up pretty big, so it was pretty cool. And there was a laundry room down there and all that kind of stuff. So, and of course, a room that went, we had the heating. We had, I think, no, we had oil heating in that house. So there was a room with the heater in it too. At any rate, upstairs there were three bedrooms. So my parents had the front bedroom on the front of the house, and Uncle Jim and I shared a bedroom in the middle, which was just great. And my sister got her own bedroom at the back of the house, so she was very happy to have a private bedroom there. And there was a bathroom up there for all of us. So it was a pretty busy bathroom, waiting in line sometimes, but that was pretty good. And we had neighbors, nice neighbors. The people on one side, the Von Hagens or Von Hagens. The Von Hagens were older couple. Their grandson, who was a good friend of mine, Jimmy Fitz, lived around the corner, down the street. On the other side of our house were the DeSimones. Um, Tori, Victoria was the little girl, a redhead. She was a delightful girl. And then her brothers, um, Tommy and what was it, Ronnie, I think. Um, they were both pretty athletic. They were kind of small guys, but very strong and very athletic. And we formed a softball team at one point. Lasted for several years, I guess. And I'm a terrible sports person. I can't play anything well, but I learned that I could pitch very well. So I became the softball pitcher for the team, which was really cool. I enjoyed that a lot. I loved playing softball at that point when I could, you know, and it was really good. But I knew nothing about sports. I mean, I was not an athlete at all. I remember one occasion I was pitching and the hitter hit a line drive right at me, and my reaction got the glove up and I caught it. So he was out. And I had the ball, and I had no idea what to do with it, you know. So I threw it somewhere. Somebody got it, you know, and I think we got another guy out. But at any rate, enough of that. Moving on. So I got my first kind of job while I was in there in my junior year, I think it was, in high school, and that was with Junior Achievement. If I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a good organization for developing entrepreneurs, and um, basically, it was a group of companies. The students would form companies from different schools or whatever, would form companies. And there was a building in the Bronx off Tremont Avenue. One big floor of that building was devoted to junior achievement. And it was divided into cubicles. I would guess there were six cubicles, maybe seven. I don't remember. And the students would form companies, and each company got a cubicle. And I guess there were probably 7 to 10 people per company. And they would produce things. First of all, they'd sell stocks in their company to their family and friends, and they'd invest that in buying materials or whatever they needed. This was the days before computers, so there was no software being written or anything like that. That was too early for that. Mostly it was handcraft type stuff that they made. You know, like I remember one company was making tiles, personalized tiles. Was kind of cool, and each one of them. And there was one company there that was very interesting, and it was the bank, because all these little companies had to have some place to put their monies or their whatever it was. So there was a bank called the First Junior Achievement Bank of the Bronx. This was 1962, I would guess. I was a junior in high school, and somehow I got elected as president. So I became a bank president at 17 years old, president of the First Junior Achievement Bank of the Bronx. I never had a stupendous title like that ever again. Uh, and the bank was sponsored. Each company was sponsored by a real company, and this bank was sponsored by Chemical Bank, which was a very, very strong bank at that time in New York City. And the vice president of human resources of the bank was one of the key people. He was a great guy. Sanford Kleiner was his name. Kleiner was his name, and he was the sponsor, and his vice president of human resources was also there. So they were very big supporters of junior achievement, which was really, really great. And as a president of the bank, I didn't have much to do because I was the president. You know, presidents don't do much; they just kind of walk around and slap people on the back. So the good thing was, the interesting thing was, the bank was open all the days. I think it was like 2 days a week that we went there, probably Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. And there were two sets of companies, so the companies would change each night. The student companies would change each night. So there were in total 8 or 10, um, or maybe 12 companies. And I was the president of the bank. And it was a blast. It was fun, doing this junior achievement stuff. I really loved junior achievement. I think it was a great organization for developing young entrepreneurs. Um, at any rate, after I finished high school, I went to St. Helena High School, which now is called Monsignor Scanlon High School. He was the Monsignor when I was there, so they renamed the school for him, but I still call it St. Helena's. And I went to St. Helena's for 4 years. I did very, very well. I took all advanced courses. I was a geek. If they weren't geeks in those days, but I was, not athletic or anything. So I didn't pal around with the in crowd. The in crowd. We had our own little group of out crowd guys. It was a boys' school, by the way, and there was a girls' school attached, but we really saw the girls. Um, so the guys who were there were also like me. They were not athletic. They weren't the in crowd. Gene Gilchrist and um, Pete Gilio and a whole bunch of them. They were really nice guys, but not very popular. Like same as me. So at any rate, that was my high school days, and I did very well. I mean, I did academically very well. I got a letter, a high school letter. That means something you sew on your jacket, I guess. But it was not for athletics; it was for forensics. I joined the speech club, the Forensic Society, and I was like third place, not first place, but at least I was competing, and it was fun. Uh, it got me going on public speaking a little bit. So at any rate, I graduated in '62 from high school, and was accepted into Manhattan College in the pre-med program. So I went to Manhattan College, and I wasn't very good. Um, First of all, well, Manhattan College was a Catholic college run by brothers. I think it was the same group of brothers that were at my high school, and pre med was tough, but academically I was good. I had a lot of problems though with chemistry. Not so much learning chemistry, but going to the lab. The lab had a lot of advanced scales that were very, very, very precise, and you needed that for chemistry. I would screw them up all the time. I was so clumsy, and if you got a fingerprint on one of the little weight things on the scale, it would throw the whole scale off. So you had to be very, very careful, and I couldn't be, and I would destroy all the not destroy, but I'd put my fingerprints all over these stupid scales. So I'd get them all out of operation after I left the lab. But at any rate, I went there and I decided that was not for me. I wasn't going to continue, so I left Manhattan College, and I was just kind of hanging out and playing softball and that kind of stuff. And my mom, Annabelle Bell Daniels, um, she told me one day, she said, Vincent, you can't just hang around the house. You better go out and get a job because you're not producing anything. So I said, okay. So, well, how did I get a job? It was pretty easy. I called Chemical Bank, the vice president of human resources, Sanford Kleiner, and I went down and had an interview and took tests, aptitude tests. That's when I found out my IQ was, I think it was 141 or 142, because I had to take an IQ test, and they gave me a job. Oh, but it wasn't a job I liked. I don't know. I had to. I sat on some machine that was sitting. It was like you were sitting on a horse, and in between your legs would come these on a conveyor-like type thing would come these checks or whatever, and you'd have to put the amount in and the account number in on this machine. Had a little keyboard, in front, and I said, "This is not what I envisioned doing." So I went to Sanford Kleiner again, and I said, "Please help me. Can you put me somewhere else?" Well, they had just started at that time, just in the beginning of what they called the Central Data Processing Department, which was the computer department. But back in that day, it was a little different from today. So he assigned me to that, which was a plum of a job. Everybody wanted to get into that. It was the new thing. So the first thing they did was they sent me to school to learn how to run an adding machine. So I had to, learn to run an adding machine. Took a week or two of training, and I got to the point where I could run this adding machine really well. And my job, very illustrious job, might I say, my job was to, at the end of the day, to run the adding machine, all the different checks and deposits and all that kind of stuff, and then compare what I had with what the computer was saying, because they were programmers there. These were the days when there wasn't programming languages really. It was all X's and O's. That's it. and they'd have long sheets of paper with X's and O's, and they'd be looking at it, trying to refine the computer, the program. And at the end of the day, we would compare my sum with the computer sum. And occasionally, not often, there was a discrepancy. And always the discrepancy was my problem. It was my fault, not the computer's fault. Except one time when it was $1 million discrepancy, if you can believe that in those days. $1 million had somehow gotten deposited to this fellow's account. And the input system for computers then was cards. Everything was, with keyboard, somebody would input the info and it would punch holes in a card. And then those stacks and stacks of these cards, you did not want to drop one of the cases with these cards in it because it was a nightmare putting it back together. But at any rate, one of these cards had been either misread or misdone somehow. At any rate, we checked that one out, and this time I was right, and the computer was wrong. Well, it wasn't really the computer; it was the input data. That, garbage in, garbage out. So it was the input data that had screwed it up, and it was cool. I actually won. Another nice thing about that job was it was night. I worked from midnight. No, I worked from midnight until 8 in the morning. But as we were it was the beginning days of computers, and we were just putting the computers online. So usually there wasn't enough work. So I would be able to leave early and catch the subway, the IRT subway. Of course, my other job was to run out and get sandwiches and coffees at night. We were in Lower Manhattan, down on, I forget what street it's called, but right across from Battery Park, down in Lower Manhattan. So there were some all-night diners or sandwich places that I'd run to and get lunch for the programmers and me and whoever else was working. And the popular song at that time, getting back to that, the popular song at that time at night was Puff the Magic Dragon. It became one of my favorite songs ever by Peter, Paul, and Mary. At any rate, enough of that. So meanwhile, I wanted to go in the Army. I was tired of being a wimpy, geeky kind of guy, and I wanted to learn leadership. And how do you do that? You go in the Army, right, to learn this stuff. But I had a bad health problem, I guess you call it. I had acne, pimples. My face, my chest, my shoulders, my back, all were covered with acne. I tried everything for acne, but I think I was eating too much New York pizza with all the oil and cheese on it, and that was probably helping it. But at any rate, I went to Whitehall Street, which is where the military did their recruiting back in those days, and went through the whole process of signing, being checked out for the Army medically, and I was refused because of the acne. They said it could get infected, so they wouldn't let me go in. So I was not allowed to go into the Army. But I was insistent, so I went back again, and I went through the whole medical test, and once again they refused me. And then the third time I went back, I overheard the doctor, and he was saying that he wanted to adopt a German Shepherd. And it so happens that a friend of mine in the Bronx, Joe, I don't remember his last name, and his sister Ann, they had German Shepherds, and they were, mating them, and they had just had a litter of German Shepherds. So I gave him the information to call. I don't know if that's what made him say it was okay for me to go in the Army or not, but he allowed me to go. He signed off on me, and I was able to sign up for the Army. So that's my prelude to or prelude to going into the Army. So then on September of 1963, I had to leave and go down to Whitehall Street to get sworn in. So I remember leaving the house that morning and walking down to Westchester Square to catch the subway. My mother was on the front porch when I left crying. Her little boy was going away and going into the Army. Oh, well, so I did. I went to Whitehall Street. I got sworn in. I got put on a bus and taken out to Fort Dix, New Jersey. Yeah, it was a little bit of a ride, but it was pleasant enough. When we got there, it wasn't pleasant anymore. The drill sergeants were yelling at us, and we had to go into this barracks. It was an old wooden barracks that was typical of the military, and you got a bunk, upper or lower. I got a lower. I wanted upper, but you got what you got. They assigned you. So I got a lower bunk in this barracks building. Um, it had a big toilet bathroom area, which was terrible for me because I was used to having a small little private bathroom. Well, I walked into this bathroom, and on one wall were sinks, three or four sinks, and on the other wall were toilets. No toilet seats, just toilets. Um, Three or four of them along in a row, and no, not concealed, right there. So you had to learn to go in and relieve yourself with other people in the room. Well, so it was a bit of a thing for me. But I forget, in the Army, you don't have the chance out in the field to go to the bathroom, so you have to learn this. And then there was a shower. It was a shower with I don't know, 2 or 4 shower heads that you could go in and get a shower. Or once again, in public, you couldn't. There was no privacy. So that was my introduction to the Army. And then, of course, there was physical training. I mean, there was a lot of training, but it was mostly physical. And that meant calisthenics every day, running every day, hand-to-hand combat. We had to learn. We had to learn how to kill with a bayonet. We had to learn, of course, how to fire rifles. We went to the rifle range a lot to shoot. One time, toward the end, it was in November. It was really cold. We went on we went out to camp out. To be in a tent. So we had to put up a little 2-person pup tent. Me and another guy, and they had what do they call, bedrolls or something like that, where you could sleep in. So we got into those. Oh, it was so cold, and we got in those, and it was so warm and comfortable. We didn't want to get up in the morning, but we did. Had no choice, and we did calisthenics and ran, and you know what that did? It got rid of my acne. All that exercise and sweating and running and fighting and everything else, my acne started going away. So the exercise really cured it. It was really, really, for me, that was really interesting. So at any rate, I'll add to this video later some photos from Fort Dix in those days, because we got like a book, a graduation book from graduating from Fort Dix, and it has a lot of pictures in it. So I'll pick some out that are nice. I'll add them to this video so you can see what it was like. So that was my start in the Army. At the end of that time, they also gave me tests, and once again, I had a high IQ. So, and I had asked when I went in the Army, I said, assign me to anything except computers. So I was fed up with computers. Oh, computers in those days weren't little boxes that sat at your desk, by the way. When I was at the bank, the IBM, I forget what they were, 3030s or something like that. They had a big room which was insulated, or not insulated. That's not the word I'm looking for, but purified air and everything in it. And it had a glass wall and an elevated floor. And in the floor, you could remove the floorings and run all the cables down there. So, of course, I had to do that a few times. And there were these big machines, these big computers there. And then there was another room, which is even more purified and sanitized. And it was where the storage was. They were tapes. Everything was, in those days, all the memory was on tape. So there were these big tape drives that would go forward and backward and forward and backward, and they would record all the information and store it. So just to give you an idea. So I told them in the Army, I said, I'll do anything except computers. Well, of course, what do they send me for? This is the Army. You'll see this in other videos too. They sent me to Fort Bliss, Texas, and it was like 2 a.m. They woke us up. So I missed graduation from basic training. And then it's the Army, hang around or hurry up and wait, So you had to rush and get ready to go and pack everything. And then you went to buses, and then you sat there waiting for the bus, and you sat on the bus. But at any rate, we went to Idlewild Airport, which was the old name for JFK, John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. And I took my first plane trip. Yeah, it was really something. I got on a jet plane, a Braniff jet plane, and we flew out to Texas, to Fort Bliss, Texas. And I remember the flight. I got a window, which was really great, and looked out the window and watched the world going by, all the green down there of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Missouri, everywhere that we flew over. And finally, we flew over this huge river, and that was the Mississippi. And I said, oh my God, I'm out in the West now. We're over the Mississippi. And then all of a sudden, all the green disappeared. and it was just dry desert, and that was Texas and that area. And we flew to Fort Bliss, which is or just outside of El Paso, Texas. Look it up on a map; you'll see where it is, in the middle of nowhere. It was in those days, and we landed, and it was November, and we got off the plane, and it was comfortable temperature. It was really nice, and they took us to these barracks. They were nice barracks. They were concrete, or stone concrete barracks, double 2 floors. Wow, different from Fort Dix, New Jersey, and mountains. I never really seen mountains that much, where you could see them. They weren't mountains with trees; they were all desert mountains, but there were mountains right there with some couple of lights on them on the top, and it was really, really impressive. So, the next story I'll tell will be about going through Nike Hercules missile school training. So I was trained to be a Nike Hercules technician. That's why I started off in electronics school. So I'll tell you more about that in the next video. Okay, I hope you can enjoy this.